next, you need to understand how all of this started. I grew up in a small town in Ohio. The kind of town where everyone knows everyone. The kind of place where people talk about each other more than they should. My mother cleaned houses. My father drove trucks until his back gave out. Nothing came easy for our family. I worked hard for everything I earned. I worked through college. I worked through medical school. I spent years studying while other people were sleeping. Eventually, I became a doctor. Through all those years, I lived by one simple rule. Do your work. Tell the truth. Stay calm. I believed that if you lived honestly, the truth would always win in the end. That belief made me good at my job. When people panicked, I stayed steady. When families cried, I stayed calm enough to help. But that same habit caused problems in my personal life. I carried my pain alone. I stayed quiet when I should have spoken. And when people started spreading lies about me, I made the biggest mistake of my life. I believed the truth would defend itself. It didn't. I married Ethan Collins when I was 28. At first, he seemed perfect. Everyone loved him. He remembered people's names. He shook hands with confidence. He knew exactly what to say to make people like him. For the first few years, I loved him too. We wanted children. At least, I thought we did. We tried for years. Nothing happened. Month after month passed. Then year after year. The empty space in our home slowly became impossible to ignore. After 2 years, I suggested something simple. We should both get tested, I told him. It's routine. I ordered those kinds of tests for patients all the time. But Ethan refused. At first, he laughed. Then he became defensive. He said there was no reason for him to get tested. He insisted the problem couldn't possibly be him. I asked again later. He became angry. After that, I stopped pushing. You cannot force another adult to walk into a doctor's office. So I went alone. A few weeks later, my results came back. Everything was normal. I remember sitting in my car staring at the paper. I felt relieved. But I also felt confused. If there was no medical problem on my side, then what was happening? I didn't know. And because I didn't know, other people started creating their own answers. Without telling me, Ethan had already started talking to his mother. Little comments. Little suggestions. Little hints. He told her maybe I was the reason we couldn't have children. Maybe something was wrong with me. Maybe I simply couldn't become a mother. Margaret believed him immediately. She adored her son. To her, Ethan could do no wrong. If he said something, she treated it as fact. Soon she started repeating the story. At first, it was small. A sad sigh at church. A quiet comment during lunch. A sympathetic look toward me. Then it grew. One evening at a church gathering, Margaret introduced me to a visitor. "This is Emma," she said. "She's a wonderful doctor." Then she lowered her voice. "Such a shame about the children." The woman looked at me with pity. I felt my stomach sink. The story had already spread. People were talking about me when I wasn't even in the room. Margaret squeezed my hand. Then she said the sentence she would repeat for years. "Some women just aren't built for motherhood." She smiled while saying it. She honestly believed it. That somehow hurt more than if she had been openly cruel. She wasn't trying to wound me. She thought she was speaking the truth. But the truth was a lie that Ethan had handed to her. I drove home that night feeling humiliated. I should have confronted him. I should have demanded answers. Instead, I stayed quiet. I thought the truth would eventually reveal itself. I was wrong. My best friend, Chloe Bennett, was the person I leaned on during those years. We had been friends since high school. She knew everything about me. She stood beside me at my wedding. She held my hand when my father died. She listened whenever I needed someone. At least, that's what I believed. Whenever the gossip got too painful, Chloe would come over. She would bring snacks or wine. She would sit on my couch and comfort me. "You're amazing, Emma," she would say. "You don't need children to be complete." Or she would say, "Don't listen to Margaret." Or, "Ethan loves you." The words sounded supportive. But looking back, they always focused on the same thing. The thing I supposedly lacked. The thing everyone believed was wrong with me. I didn't notice other things. I didn't notice how often Chloe watched Ethan. I didn't notice how much she seemed to know about his schedule. I didn't notice the tiny signs. I trusted her completely. That trust would eventually destroy me. Then came the day everything fell apart. I came home after a long hospital shift. A large envelope sat on the kitchen counter. At first, I thought it was paperwork. Then I opened it. Divorce papers. I stood there staring. The house felt strangely empty. When I walked upstairs, half of Ethan's clothes were gone. His closet was nearly empty. He hadn't even waited to tell me in person. He had simply left. Within days, everyone knew. Within a week, Ethan was living with Chloe. My husband had left me for my best friend. The entire town immediately picked sides. And almost nobody picked mine. People repeated the same story. Emma cared more about her job than her marriage. Emma was cold. Emma couldn't give Ethan a family. Emma drove him away. Margaret made sure everyone heard it. And Chloe never corrected a single word. The two people who knew me best allowed me to become the villain in my own story. The pain was unbearable. But I still stayed quiet. I didn't argue online. I didn't call people. I didn't defend myself. The next morning, I went to work. A teenager came into the emergency room with a broken arm. I fixed it. I smiled. I told him he would be okay. Then I went home and cried where nobody could see me. That became my life. Months turned into a year. I focused on my work. The hospital became my safe place. Inside those walls, nobody cared about church gossip. Nobody cared about my marriage. Nobody called me broken. I was simply Dr. Emma Parker. And that was enough. Or at least, I tried to convince myself it was. Then something happened that changed everything. For years, I had worked toward becoming head of the emergency department. I had written protocols. I had trained staff. I had spent countless hours helping improve the hospital. Everyone expected me to get the position. Even I expected it. Then suddenly, things changed. Questions started appearing. Strange questions. People began asking about my judgment. About my emotional stability. About my personal life. A hospital board member who knew Ethan's family started making comments. Nothing direct. Nothing obvious. Just enough to plant doubt. When the promotion was finally announced, someone else got it. Someone with less experience. Someone with fewer achievements. I sat in the meeting room listening to the decision. The explanation sounded polite. But I knew what had happened. The gossip had followed me to work. The lie had finally reached the one place I cared about most. My career. That night I sat alone in my car. The parking lot was nearly empty. I stared through the windshield and finally admitted something to myself. My silence was not protecting me. It was hurting me. I had spent years carrying a lie that belonged to someone else. And now it was costing me everything. A trusted nurse gave me the name of an attorney. Her name was Victoria Hayes. A week later, I sat in Victoria's office. I told her everything. The marriage. The rumors. The divorce. The promotion I had lost. She listened carefully. When I finished, she folded her hands. What you're describing may be defamation, she said. I stared at her. The word felt heavy. She explained what it meant. If people knowingly spread false statements that damaged my reputation, there could be consequences. But proving it would not be easy. To win, Victoria said, we need to prove 3 things. She held up 3 fingers. First, the statements were false. Second, they were shared with other people. Third, those statements caused real harm. I nodded slowly. The harm is easy, she continued. The lost promotion proves that. Then she paused. The difficult part is proving the statements were false. I knew exactly what she meant. The entire town believed I was the reason Ethan and I never had children. How could I prove otherwise? Victoria looked directly at me. Sometimes silence is not strength, she said. Sometimes silence only protects the people telling the lie. Those words stayed with me. For 2 weeks, I thought about them. Every day. Every night. I made lists. I wrote down everything I could lose. Friends. Reputation. Privacy. Then I made another list. My career. My name. The truth. The right to stop being blamed for something I never did. Eventually, the second list became more important than the first. I called Victoria on a Monday morning. I'm ready, I said. There was a brief pause. Then she smiled. Good, she replied. Let's find out what really happened. That phone call started a chain of events that none of us could stop. And before long, a secret hidden for 7 years was about to come crashing into the light. Victoria moved quickly. Over the next few weeks, she prepared the case carefully. Every witness. Every statement. Every rumor. Everything was documented. Reading the paperwork felt strange. Years of pain were suddenly organized into pages and evidence. Things that had once felt invisible now had dates, names, and proof attached to them. When the lawsuit became public, the town exploded with gossip. People talked about it everywhere. At church. At restaurants. At grocery stores. At school events. Some people called me brave. Others called me bitter. Many people said I should simply move on. Margaret reacted exactly how Victoria expected. Instead of backing down, she repeated the same story even louder. She told everyone I was angry because Ethan had found happiness. She said grief had made me cruel. She said I was trying to destroy a family. Every time she repeated the lie, she unknowingly helped my case. Victoria explained why. If they keep insisting the story is true, she said, eventually they'll have to prove it. Not long afterward, Ethan's lawyer filed a response. Victoria called me immediately. They made a mistake, she said. What kind of mistake? The biggest one possible. My stomach tightened. They officially claimed the statements were true. I sat quietly. Victoria continued. They are saying you were the reason the marriage never produced children. I didn't fully understand why that mattered. Then she explained. If they want to prove you were the problem, they may have to open Ethan's medical history too. Suddenly my heart started racing. For years Ethan had refused testing. For years he had avoided every conversation. For years he had acted as if the subject belonged only to me. Now that wall might finally crack. It's not guaranteed, Victoria warned. But they just opened a door. That night I barely slept. Memories kept returning. One memory stood out more than any other. 7 years earlier, Ethan had taken a trip to a city clinic. He called it a routine medical visit. He left early in the morning. When he came home, he seemed different. Quiet. Irritable. Distracted. When I asked if something was wrong, he snapped at me. Then he changed the subject. After that day, he never discussed fertility testing again. Not once. At the time, I thought nothing of it. Now it felt important. The next morning, I told Victoria. She listened carefully. "It's not proof," she said. "But it gives us a reason to ask questions." Soon afterward, she filed a motion requesting access to relevant medical records. Ethan's legal team fought hard. Very hard. They argued privacy. They argued relevance. They argued everything they could think of. Watching them fight so desperately made me suspicious. People rarely defend nothing with that much energy. Then came the waiting. Waiting became torture. At work I remained calm. I treated patients. I handled emergencies. I smiled when families needed reassurance. But inside, I was constantly wondering. What was Ethan hiding? Why was everyone so afraid of those records? Weeks later, Victoria placed a thick document in front of me. It was my sworn statement. Every important event had been written down. Every rumor. Every witness. Every conversation. Every consequence. I read it slowly. Page after page. The church gatherings. Margaret's comments. The lost promotion. The divorce. The damage to my reputation. Seeing everything together made something clear. The lie looked much smaller on paper than it had inside my head. For years it had felt huge. Powerful. Untouchable. Now it looked fragile. Like something that could finally break. I signed the document. Victoria nodded. "The process is moving now," she said. And she was right. A few days later, the judge made a decision. I was at work when Victoria called. I stepped into a supply room to answer. "The judge approved it," she said. My breath caught. "The records must be produced." I leaned against a shelf. For a moment, I couldn't speak. The wall Ethan had hidden behind for 7 years was finally coming down. Across town, panic started spreading. Margaret called Victoria's office. More than once. Ethan requested private meetings with his lawyer. Something had changed. For the first time, they were scared. I wasn't celebrating. I wasn't even happy. I simply felt relieved. The truth finally had a chance. A week later, something strange happened. My phone buzzed. The message came from Chloe. The first message in over a year. "Please stop this. Think about the baby." I stared at the screen. Why was she worried? The lawsuit wasn't about her. It wasn't about the child. It was about lies told about me. Yet she sounded terrified. I read the message again. "Please stop this. Think about the baby." The fear in those words felt real. And suddenly I became curious. Very curious. What exactly was Chloe afraid of? I never replied. I simply waited. 8 days later, Victoria called. "Come to my office." Her voice sounded serious. I knew something had happened. When I arrived, she was already waiting. She slid a single page toward me. Most of it was hidden beneath court protection. Only one section remained visible. One sentence. One diagnosis. One truth. 7 years earlier, Ethan had been diagnosed with a medical condition that made biological fatherhood impossible. I stared at the page. My hands remained perfectly still. But inside, everything shifted. For years people had called me broken. For years I had questioned myself. For years I had carried shame that never belonged to me. And all along, Ethan had known. He had known the truth. The entire time. I felt grief more than anger. Grief for the years I had lost. Grief for every cruel comment. Grief for every night I had wondered what was wrong with me. Nothing had been wrong with me. Nothing. The lie had always belonged to Ethan. And he had handed it to me so he wouldn't have to carry it himself. I left Victoria's office in silence. When I reached my car, I sat there for a long time. Then another thought appeared. A thought I couldn't ignore. If Ethan couldn't father a child, then whose child was Chloe raising? The question hit me like lightning. The baby everyone celebrated. The baby Margaret bragged about. The baby Ethan proudly called his son. That child could not be Ethan's. At least not biologically. Suddenly Chloe's text made perfect sense. Please stop this. Think about the baby. She wasn't afraid for Ethan. She was afraid of the truth. Victoria agreed. There's more here, she said. But let the court uncover it. That's exactly what happened. The answer arrived in an unexpected way. The man who walked into the hospital that afternoon had a name. Andrew Foster. At first, I didn't know who he was. Later, everything became clear. Months before Chloe became pregnant, she had secretly been involved with Andrew. She eventually chose Ethan instead. Then she completely cut Andrew out of her life. Blocked his calls. Ignored his messages. Disappeared. She never told him she was pregnant. Never told him she had given birth. Nothing. But Andrew had questions. The timeline never made sense to him. Eventually someone mentioned the hospital where Chloe delivered. Someone mentioned the date. And Andrew decided to see for himself. That was the man who entered the maternity ward while Margaret was insulting me. The moment Chloe saw him, all the color drained from her face. She knew. She knew exactly why he was there. The truth was walking toward her. And she couldn't stop it. Soon another legal process began. Genetic testing was requested. Evidence was reviewed. Questions were asked. The results confirmed what many people had started to suspect. Andrew was the biological father. Not Ethan. The news shattered everything. What hurt most was realizing Ethan had probably known all along. He knew about his diagnosis. He knew the child couldn't be biologically his. Yet he still used that baby as proof. Proof that he was the man everyone believed him to be. Proof that I had supposedly failed him. The cruelty of that realization stayed with me. Not because I wanted revenge. But because it showed how far he was willing to go to protect his image. Victoria later told me Ethan's lawyer wanted a settlement. A private settlement. Money. A correction sent quietly to the hospital board. A promise to repair my reputation. In exchange, everything would remain hidden. No public hearing. No public truth. Just silence. Victoria placed the offer on her desk. It's actually a strong offer, she admitted. I understood why. Financially, it was a win. Professionally, it was a win. But something felt wrong. The lies about me had never been whispered. They had been spoken publicly. At church. At family gatherings. At community events. People heard the lie. They deserved to hear the truth. I shook my head. No. Victoria studied me carefully. You're sure? Yes. She nodded slowly. Then we go to court. Before the hearing, Margaret came to visit me. She appeared at my apartment on a Sunday afternoon. For a moment I almost didn't answer. But eventually I opened the door. She looked tired. Older. Smaller. For the first time, she didn't seem powerful. She seemed scared. Please drop the lawsuit, she said. Not for Ethan. For the family. For the baby. I looked at her quietly. Part of me felt sorry for her. She had spent years believing her son. Years defending him. Years repeating his lies. Now everything was collapsing. But then she said the same sentence she had repeated for years. Some women just aren't built for motherhood. Even now. Even after everything. She still clung to the lie. I took a slow breath. The lie was never mine, I said softly. Go home, Margaret. She left without another word. The courtroom hearing arrived a few weeks later. The room was crowded. Hospital board members attended. Church members attended. Curious neighbors attended. Margaret sat beside Ethan. Chloe sat near the back. Andrew sat several rows behind her. Everyone seemed nervous. Except me. Oddly enough, I felt calm. The truth was finally here. Victoria presented the evidence carefully. Witness after witness. Statement after statement. Then came the medical records. Only the necessary information was read aloud. Nothing more. Just enough. Enough to establish one simple fact. Ethan had known for 7 years. The room became silent. Completely silent. You could almost feel people rethinking everything they believed. Victoria then presented the contradiction. The diagnosis. The child. The DNA evidence. The timeline. One fact connected to another until the truth became impossible to ignore. Suddenly Ethan stood up. That's not. The judge immediately stopped him. Margaret rose too. Her face had turned pale. She pointed toward me. This isn't right. Her voice shook. Years of certainty were falling apart. Then she repeated the sentence one final time. Some women just aren't built for it. The courtroom went silent. I slowly stood. I had waited years for this moment. I looked directly at her. My voice remained calm. You're right, Margaret. Everyone stared. She looked confused. You're absolutely right. I paused. Then I looked at Ethan. One person in that marriage was never able to have children. The silence became even heavier. I looked back at Margaret. The medical file only had his name on it. No shouting followed. No dramatic argument. Just silence. Pure silence. Because the truth was finally standing in the room. And nobody could argue with it anymore. Margaret lowered her hand. Ethan sat down. His face disappeared behind his hands. The story was over. The lie had nowhere left to hide. A few weeks later, the hospital reopened the leadership position. The board reviewed everything. This time they made the right decision.